Kate Mila Falcher, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. We are on video number 8 of our Skinwalker saga. This is the second book in the series, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which we segued to quite seamlessly, I think, from the hunt for the Skinwalker, which we started in video 1. So approximately 6 videos for the first book, and this is probably going to be the last video for this series. I heard back from a lot of people, and everyone is thoroughly freaked out. Mission accomplished. Okay, let's just continue along this chapter 9, bringing something home. The infectious agents model. So things are getting stranger by the minute. We don't like to talk about the hitchhiker, not a real person, hitchhiker, too much because everybody's afraid it's going to trigger it or something. I have several colleagues that were putting instruments out to measure things at their house as well as at the ranch. And we're measuring simultaneous events occurring at both places that may be 1,000 miles apart. This is one of the lead investigators at the Skinwalker Ranch. The hitchhiker being the weird phenomena that come home with the investigators. Anyone who stayed at the Skinwalker more than a day brought something home. Even the wives of the NIDS team, while the team was still on the ranch, they reported weird stuff going on at home. This escalated with the AAWSAP in 2009. All 5 intelligence agency personnel had profound anomalous experiences while on the ranch and brought them home. For 12 years, the Axelrod family struggled with it. This is, these are hardcore government and military and intelligence and, people that you wouldn't expect to even talk about this. So Axelrod's wife and teenage children were subjected to nightmarish dog men appearing in their backyard, to blue, red, yellow, and white orbs floating through the home and in the backyard, to black shadow people standing over the beds when they awoke, to a relentless barrage of loud, unexplained footsteps walking up and down the stairs in their house. What was once a normal middle-class home in suburban Virginia became an inferno of bizarre, unexplained phenomena. Axelrod and his family were certain that the trigger for this was his first trip to Skinwalker Ranch. It's indeed lucky that the Axelrod family was and is extremely stable, psychologically well-adjusted and grounded, and prone to matter-of-fact reactions to these events. Juliet Witt and her roommate had intense poltergeist activity. Wine bottles that were thrown, we read about that. Ceiling fans would turn on, TVs turned off on their own, lights going off, on, flickering, books showing up piled at the base of the stairs, clothing moved and laid out in the daughter's bedroom floor with no one else in the house. And this continues till today. It originally caused severe emotional reactions in her roommate. It provoked the young man to leave the house. This emotional outcome of a Skinwalker transmission event was a warning to other military personnel who were contemplating spending time at the ranch. My advice is just don't even go. Read the book, watch my videos, stay home. Okay, health effects, and this is not a laughing matter. Costigan's wife got Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Axelrod's wife got lupus and Raynaud's. 2 teens, their 2 teenage children, also suffered extreme flu-like symptoms. They can't be more specific in the book because of HIPAA, but the number of reports of illnesses, autoimmune disorders, even Bigelow had anomalies at his home. Everyone takes things home. We don't know what it was going. We don't know what it was, if it was going to stay with you and maybe stay for years or for life. They had no idea. For example, George Knapp, his wife saw apparitions and orbs. 10 security guards had hitchhikers, the phenomena that followed them home. Likotsky did. Susan Ash from the DIA, who sat in the cubicle next to Likotsky, Her brother, now this is really interesting. She didn't go to the ranch. She sat next to the guy who went to the ranch. Her brother, who had no contact with any of them because he didn't work there, he didn't know Lukatsky, lived in a different state. He had anomalies beginning the day before Lukatsky told the DIA of his experiences. So, clear on that. Lukatsky goes to the ranch. He comes home, weird things start to happen. He decides, let's just say on Monday, tomorrow on Tuesday, I'm going to report this at work. Monday night, his cubicle neighbor, her brother in a different state, starts to have weird things happen at his house. Unbelievable. Oh, I have to read you this. Her brother, who had no experience whatsoever of all of this, had an escalating series of close encounters with UAPs in rural Mocksville, North Carolina, that continued for months afterwards. Eddie, his name, Eddie's quiet country home suddenly had large orange UAPs hovering outside at night. Aerial photos of his house were sent to his mobile phone from unknown numbers. His pet dog once disappeared through multiple locked doors while Eddie was asleep, only to be found in the morning whimpering outside. Could Lukatsky have transmitted something to Susanna Ash, who subsequently passed it on to her brother? There's no answer to that. That's just what people are asking. Axelrod's children and their friends had experiences of, like, their friends they went to school with saw wolfmen in the yard and blue orbs. It's like a transmission of an infectious agent with symptoms that profoundly altered perceptual environments. Some suggest interviewing people from an epidemiological model in the future, like, I don't know what that model is, but treating them like you've been exposed to something and you may catch it. And here's what we're going to talk about. In 2016, in an article in the Journal of the AMA, the American Medical Association, they talked about weapon violence, I'm being careful here what I'm talking about, follows an epidemic-like process of social contagion. It's transmitted between individuals through social interaction. It's a predictable model. In other words, not only have they recognized it, reported on it, documented it, measured it, described it, and explained it, they can predict when the next one will happen. Also correlated from the ranch are all of these autoimmune diseases that people are getting, family members are getting. The same thing happened in 1973 to scientists studying Uri Geller. Remember Uri Geller bending the spoons? These are the Lawrence Livermore lab scientists. For example, as the scientist was at the lab, his family at home had small flying saucers in their living room, fly through their living room. Oh my God. Sometimes cryptoid animals would be in the yard, like a large raven, which also appeared at the foot of the bed. They saw orbs, black shadows. So there's a lot of overlap between Uri Geller and the Skinwalker cases. In both, the central victim had high clearance and a senior position in a government agency. The psychic trigger plunged multiple people and their families into high strangeness that included balls of light, archetypical mythological animals, poltergeist activity most often in bedrooms, halls, and backyards, black rectangles, cubes. The physicist Hal Puthoff worked on both cases, and he had the same thing happen to him. Chapter 10, Senator Harry Reid's letter. In May of 2009, Reid was concerned that there was too much exposure of Bigelow's contract and it would lead to opposition in the Department of Defense. There's a lot of infighting. Also, because he knew China and Russia were very invested in UAP technology, he feared the United States was asleep at the wheel. What he's saying is they're taking this seriously. They're actually taking advantage of the technology that they find, hint, hint, and we in the US are talking about little green men and making fun. So he was concerned the US was asleep at the wheel. In Reid's mind, there was a grave danger that China and Russia, who were not handcuffed by people who were conservative or fearful of losing their career as they are in the Pentagon, not the same in China or Russia, that they would succeed in taking quantum leaps forward from exploiting UAP-based hardware, who knew, and thus gain an irreversible technological upper hand over the United States. On June 24th, 2009, Reid took the bull by the horns and, in consultation with the intelligence community, drafted a bold letter to then Deputy Secretary of Defense William Lynn. Okay. For security reasons, in his letter to Deputy Secretary of Defense at the Department of Defense, William Lynn, to keep things on the down low, they used the term AATIP instead of AAWSIP. When discussing this, they wanted to deflect attention from the real program. There was no AATIP. It was their code for what they were doing. He expressed his concerns in a very powerful letter. Given the likelihood that the technologies that are involved will be applied to future systems involving space flight, weapons, communications, propulsion, all of that, he lists them all. Even the use of conventional protocols will not adequately ensure that all aspects of the project are secure. He mentioned the defense advantages for the United States to continue these studies. What they're doing is they're jockeying to continue the program and to continue money. He named Robert Herbert to be his contact with the Department of Defense. So he gave the letter to him, meaning for him to pass it on. The letter meant for Lynn instead got copied and passed around to the wrong people, and it causes enormous kerfuffle, very big controversy. They had a big meeting at the Pentagon. They were unwilling. They were very upset about it. The publicity had been unintended. They were very upset. Many big shots were all worked up. This meeting seemed good for the attendees. Lists all the big shots from the Pentagon that showed up to complain. You know, they all got high-powered jobs afterwards. The brakes were put on the AAWSIP, the research project. And the cat was out of the bag about Flying Saucer Project at the DIA. Chapter 11. Meeting with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. So Lakatsky, Kelleher, Grossman, this is Bigelow's director of investigations. They all went to Washington, D.C. to an Air Force base to meet with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which is a legendary high-status organization. Bigelow hoped that the Air Force would identify the sightings in Bigelow's data, that Bigelow could focus on the unknown. So what he was hoping was the Air Force would say, we know what that is. We know what that is. You can take those off your list. We have identified them. They're not unidentified flying objects. We've identified them. And then they won't waste their time researching things that the Air Force already knows about. In exchange, Bigelow would give the Air Force any weird technological reports, be a conduit to the Air Force. The Air Force team, they were skeptical. The Bigelow guys would have to report on how good their security was, their scientific expertise, and justify everything, and their multidisciplinary approach to studying the future of space technology. They also had to identify potential threats to national security. So they're putting the brakes on their kind of independent study. The Air Force was blunt. What do you guys want? Bigelow's team said that we want the data on all the incursions that you have onto Air Force bases. So the later meeting between Grossman and retired Colonel Barry Hennessy, a longtime U.S. Air Force security, counterintelligence, and special project guy, his question was, why is the DIA interested in UAPs now? Why suddenly now? He admitted that decades of military sightings had happened with very few explanations for it. They identified very, very few of the unidentified flying objects. The military did. This guy admitted it. He had a book with a huge list of military encounters. He hinted at the destruction of a lot of old records, and he warned some sightings could be human technology that was top secret. So without saying anything, what he was saying was the Air Force might have fancy technology they're not telling anybody about that looks like ETs to regular people. Chapter 12, hostile triangles, ours or theirs. There's a quote here. Remember the lights over Phoenix? Well, the lights over Phoenix were actually over multiple states. It was Arizona, New Mexico, I think, I don't want to say it, I could be wrong, I think part of California, maybe part of Utah, but suffice it to say it was more than just the city of Utah, and it was huge. It happened over a number of nights, gigantic black triangles that filled the sky. You looked up at night and you didn't see sky. You saw this black triangle obscuring the stars. And some people just saw lights because they saw it from far. Thousands of reports. Air traffic control guys, pilots in the air, pilots on the ground, military bases, cops of all sorts, all over the place. And the then governor of, I think it was Arizona, I hate to misspeak, but the governor came out and did a press conference and made fun of the whole thing. He had a guy dressed up like a little green man come out, you know, like an ET, made a big deal of how ridiculous it was. And then after he was done being governor, he was no longer running for office. He did another press conference and he said, I saw it too and it was real and I'm sorry, but I had no choice because of, you know, my job. I had to lie. So, quote, active measures are contradictory. They are covert operations designed to achieve overt influence, secret devices deployed in public debates, carefully hidden, yet visible in plain sight. So this is going to be a new approach. May 8th of 2009, 11:45 p.m. in Georgia, Derek Jones, a worker, no, I'm sorry, he woke up after his dogs started barking late at night. His 10-year-old son and his 10-year-old son's friend were camping in the backyard in a tent. And in the sky, he woke up because of the dogs. In the sky, he saw a large triangular craft with lights and 4 small objects behind it with their own lights. 2 were egg-shaped of these objects and 2 of the objects were round. The lights were changing color, blue, green, black, white, blue, in a repeating pattern. The small objects were erratic. They darted around. Sometimes they moved away from the triangle and they went down into the backwoods for 2 or 3 seconds out of sight. Then they came back to the triangle. The triangle was about 60 to a few hundred feet above in the air, and it was 300 feet long. It made no sound. It had stars, fake stars, placed on the bottom of it, like camouflage. So when you looked up, you'd see stars and you wouldn't think anything of it. It made maneuvers that are not possible with physics or modern aviation. He tried to video and photograph it, and let's all say it together, the batteries died. He tried a million candle power spotlight. He was hit by a 2 to 3 inch in diameter light. No, I'm sorry, I think it must be feet diameter of light, a beam, a blue-white light beam from the front center of this triangle. And it hit him for about 3 seconds, and he turned his back on it. So when it hit him, he got burnt in his neck and shoulders. He ran in and watched from the window. 2 of the small objects sped up towards the sky, and they were gone. The triangle turned on its side, and with the other 2 shot outward out of sight very, very quickly. And they entered sort of a vortex above in the sky. He called MUFON right away, reported it. He got sick. He got skin on his back burned. 2 a.m. the next night, helicopters came and flew low over his house. In the distance, he saw others with spotlights on the ground searching. 7:30 in the morning, the next morning, loud knocking on the door. 2 men came to the door to discuss his sighting report to MUFON. He felt very intimidated. These were pale men in black. They seemed very large, very tall and big. He thought they were armed. They seemed armed. They intimidated him. They told him, don't talk. They followed him. He got their plates and looked them up. They were from the Department of Homeland Security. So the health effects that he had: hair loss, 3 weeks later, abnormal blood tests, very low red blood cells. He was unwell for months. In October, he got lumps on his legs, groin, and back. By February of 2010, they were painful and larger, and he was not doing well. I won't go into this medical stuff that they did, but they got an MRI. He had something like a malignancy related to ionizing radiation, all kinds of weird blood results that he got back. More lumps appeared all over him. They had one removed surgically, and it was a weird non-malignant lymphoma. After about a year, the biopsy said it was a non-malignant lymphoma. The pathologist, who had 22 years of experience, said, I have never seen a case like this. He now, today, has 24 lumps. Finally, after more tests, June of 2010, they told him it was the result of radiation. So this entire event raises questions about what he saw, why he was blasted by the light, why Department of Homeland Security agents came to his house and threatened him. They had been hundreds of cases of black triangle sightings. The book describes several cases of triangles that were seen by multiple witnesses, and I won't go into it because there's nothing really exciting about it other than the fact that there were gigantic black triangles in the sky and people saw them. The Air Force investigators reported that they had nothing in the air officially at the time. A report was done on 127 cases that were all the same. These things flew low, overpopulated areas, were silent, huge, slow, hovering, very brightly lit, not consistent with any U.S. military craft. Chapter 13, AAWSAP progress. So they had lots of progress between September of 2008 and 2010. Their monthly activity garnered reports of hundreds of pages to the DIA And there were numerous investigations that were well documented. They connected with MUFON to get data. They collaborated very well. Bigelow had multiple laboratories across the country willing to work on MUFON specimens. They would give them specimens to Bigelow, and Bigelow had labs everywhere to do that. They had a rapid reaction team of investigators. They had a database that was upgraded and an archive was corrected. They were the first to investigate the Tic Tac case, the Nimitz, and Axelrod and his team interviewed and investigated 4 of the pilots. And they, in order to be a pilot of one of these planes, you're investigated to your DNA. They investigate you. They do psychological testing. They don't want anybody that has the slightest stain on their record or less than sterling qualifications technically. Great citizenship, nice to old ladies, and also no history of medical problems, and certainly a thorough mental health vetting. They don't want anyone who's going to be hysterical or reactionary or freeze or, so these people, they reinvestigated them on, independent of the military. Bigelow's people reinvestigated them and found them not wanting. The event happened November of 2004 off of San Diego. They were practicing for deployment in the Arabian Sea. They had a bunch of boats, including the Nimitz. They had a submarine. One of the boats had a state-of-the-art radar that had just been like the best radar you could get. They had Super Hornet pilots. One pilot saw a UAP, now I know we're repeating, but still, saw a UAP hovering over the water shaped like a Tic Tac. It spotted them and it began to mirror their movement. And as the Hornet approached, the UAP accelerated at supersonic speed. When you hear these pilots, because they were interviewed on TV, you hear them talking about it, they were absolutely freaked out. And you could tell they really were reluctant to even be talking on camera. I think they were ordered to do it. The radar on the Princeton boat then shocked the radar operator on the Princeton boat was shocked and said that the Tic Tac had arrived at the Comboat Air Patrol location. So this is the next location that the fighter pilots are supposed to go. So they get in these fighter jets, these Hornets, and they go up to a certain spot. And at that spot, they're told, now go elsewhere. And they're given directions where to go. Nobody knows what that spot's going to be until the moment it's said out loud to them. It's a secret. Only the radar operator and the pilot know, and they don't know until the moment that the order is given. And when they got there, the Tic Tac was there already. A report was made. It did not go up the chain of command because it was a training mission. It went to the 3rd Fleet Intelligence. Axelrod, which is interesting because I wonder if the chain of command would have just kept it quiet. Hard to say. Axelrod found that it was not a known vehicle, not an aircraft of the United States or any foreign country. It behaved in such a way that the radar-based capabilities were not effective. And I had to look that up. And it means that all the equipment was neutralized and therefore it was no longer able to engage a target. In other words, it couldn't shoot at something and be accurate. Engaging a target is like aiming the fancy weapon inside the airplane. It had all been blocked. It had advanced propulsion. It was able to be stationary or to attain velocities far greater than any known vehicle. So in 2017, in the New York Times, the then Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies did a forensic investigation. They made a 270-page report, and it kind of followed on the heels of the story in the New York Times. And they created a huge database with global information. Tens of thousands of cases. Jacques Vallée's protocols for determining credibility. They ended up at the end of the first year with 9 databases. So they were broken into, these are the videos, these are the eyewitness reports, this is whatever. And it was a huge amount of information. June of 2010, they did the Russo Thread 3 project that was held by the DIA. So what is this? It was collected by George Knapp between 1993 and 1996. He went on trips to the Soviet Union. And he was shown wide-ranging technological analyses of UAPs by 15 separate organizations, institutions, and departments in the USSR Ministry of Defense. George Knapp met many of the top people. Documents were outlined for him about Soviet UAP investigative efforts. And once again, in case you didn't hear the earlier videos, UAP is unidentified aerial phenomena. It's a fancy term for UFO, unidentified flying object. They began a comprehensive program. Why they gave it to George Knapp is anybody's guess, but he began a comprehensive program in 1991 that dwarfed the program of any other country. The U.S. got these documents from Knapp, and this is Soviet Union in 1991. The U.S. got the documents about it from Knapp, and they learned of 3 different UAP collection efforts in the USSR military. What did I do with the book? Here it is. Okay, I don't really want to belabor this. It's very long, and YouTube doesn't like that. So let me summarize here. So the program that USSR was doing began 30 years before the U.S. ever did anything, before the UAP task force report ever came out. It was seen as a threat that the Americans finally discover 30 years later that Russia's been on top of this for 3 decades plus. And this freaks the United States out because they feel it's a threat to their defense capabilities. So it was seen as a threat. The USSR was 30 years ahead of us. There was a fear of the technical advantages the USSR would have. Then they sent 2 teams of their investigators to Brazil. They split up. One went to the Fortaleza town to investigate and talk to UFO organizations. There was an event there. They met with Brazilian government leaders about Brazil releasing its UAP documents. The second team met with other UAP organizations and General Ochoa, who had previously met in Washington, D.C. with Bigelow. And they discussed Operation Plate. So let's talk about that. In the 1970s, especially in 1977, there were lots of sightings around the island of Colares and the Amazon Delta in Brazil. Several kinds of UFOs were seen. Some flew, some went under the water, some did both. Population was targeted by light beams, and there was illness and there was death. The Brazilian Air Force had what they called Operation Plate in 77 and 78. This was on-site investigations. The government and the military of Brazil took this very seriously. They did more than 1,000 pages of interviews, more than 500 pictures. They had 15 hours of movies. These things. The AASWAP got copies of all of this that went into the database. General Ochoa helped them. In 2010, the DIA got a 141-page report on advanced physics of the Tic Tacs separate from what Axelrod had. So what the point that the book is making is they have these databases, and they say, yeah, we're globally collecting reports. This is just showing you some of the variety and number of incidents and reports that they actually got. They've used a very new computational capability. They were able to get advanced engineering concepts, and it helped in the study of transmedium behavior. Transmedium behavior is when a UFO flies around in the sky, flies into the water, comes out of the water, like under the water for a while, comes back out and flies up into the sky and goes into outer space. Bigelow had helped physicist Tal Puthoff, a CIA remote viewer. He brought the experience of Operation Stargate and a lot of other remote viewers with him. They had remote viewed this sort of thing, and they had this to say. During the Stargate program, remote viewers detected exotic events and technologies relevant to the AAWSAP Bigelow initiative. These included detection of apparent basing facilities for exotic craft, description of apparent exotic craft accidents, and observation of exotic craft surveillance of military targets, the latter correlating with independent national resource records. So they were able to prove the remote viewers were looking at something that could legitimately be shown to be real. They used exacting scientific remote viewing protocol. And we've spoken to Stefan Schwartz before, who was one of the original remote viewers and taught remote viewing, wrote a book about it. And it's sitting over there ready to go anytime. And it's, I haven't done that book. I haven't presented the book. I've read it. I've taken notes on it. And I haven't presented it because it's technical. Remote viewing is not just, oh, I'm going to focus now. No, it's not like that at all. It's a double-blind, scientifically controlled, rigid method. And most people who do it don't do it right. You don't just do it. And these guys are certified because they've proven what they can do to the government. And they were seeing weird UFO-ish type things. The contract between Bigelow and the AASWAP did not include remote viewing program because it cost too much. But they conducted limited feasibility tests. They did it anyway. The result of the ranch remote viewing is pretty interesting. So they drew pictures, and apparently the map, in remote viewing, and apparently it looks almost exactly like Skinwalker Ranch. And keep in mind now that when they're remote viewing this, they don't know. They're just given coordinates. 25 degrees latitude north, that kind of thing. And they came out with all the stuff that what they were looking at was the Skinwalker Ranch, although they had no idea. So McMonigle is a guy who is like the best remote viewer. His sketch of the Skinwalker Ranch, description of the environment, the animals present, characteristics of the two ranch managers and two security guards were excellent. But he indicated, sit down, he indicated that a fifth individual was also present. He described a male, 60 to 70 pounds, with a height of 4 feet 3 inches, with no hair, age not determined. Exact physical features were unclear, unlike the guards, the managers, the people, other people. McMonigle said that the fifth individual could not be seen by the ranch personnel, but did attempt test communications with them to see their response. He indicated that the communication was not precise or clear, and to the individuals on the ranch, it would seem to come from above and behind their heads. Okay. Project Physics. This got science and technical writers to do predictions of what aerospace capability might look like in 40 years. And it got a lot of effusive praise. These are some of the things that came from these investigative attempts by Bigelow and then also the government. They designed a UAP viewing platform, equipment, not people. You know, they would set up all this equipment that they could remotely turn on and watch. Project Hestdalen in Norway collected data for decades. The Bigelow group designed one that could be trucked in and left someplace. It was built and tested and working when the project was terminated in late 2010. Monthly reports of detailed investigations into UAP incursions into military facilities, especially northern tier nuclear missile bases in the 1970s. A good book for this is UFOs and Nukes by Robert Hastings. I can't believe I said that they canceled this program. All the good stuff that they're doing here, gone. Staggering failure of U.S. intelligence, who ignored tons of evidence of UAP incursions into the most sensitive weapon storage areas. They flew over military bases with nuclear capability. They flew over military missile silos. They turned off missile silos. Warheads. They turned on nuclear warheads. They changed the codes on them so nobody could do anything with them. They were seen on several different radars at the same time. They were observed with the eyeballs of the perimeter security driving around in a Jeep. It's shocking that they ignored it. In 1975, and I didn't copy all the stories because we've done them a million times. They are in all the books. We probably know more in detail about these incursions into nuclear bases than the government wanted to admit ever. 1975, Wordsmith Air Force Base, the Air Force Sergeant Stephen A. Smith told of his flight being redirected to check an unidentified craft hovering over a weapon storage area. A grave national security threat had serious implications. They followed the UAP for more than 2 hours. They couldn't get close enough to see its shape. They saw only one steady orange light going about 400 knots and playing with them, with the pilots. The investigators got dozens of separate witnesses. This is one incident. I guess I thought it was unusual enough. We'll see here. 2010 Staff Sergeant Omar Gonzalez, Dakota Air Traffic Control, Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, contacted Bigelow to report that he and his crew were working traffic control during the swing shift when their radar picked up unidentified traffic crossing a passing aircraft. Call sign Columbia. The Columbia pilot responded, saying that he had visual contact with the object. Gonzalez then selected the target and discovered that it had no beacon, that goes onto radar, no altitude recorded. While the Columbia pilot said the object was passing approximately 2,000 feet above him. This encounter occurred 18 miles south of the Air Force Base runway. Suddenly, the object vanished from view. Simultaneously, the radar track disappeared. A few minutes later, the target suddenly reappeared on radar, this time behind the Columbia aircraft. They followed up and interviewed the primary witnesses, but had difficulty obtaining the cockpit transcripts from the Air Force Base. Eventually, after multiple rounds, the Bigelow people were successful in obtaining the cockpit transcripts through the Freedom of Information Act. As of late 2010, when the program was prematurely shut down. The Air Force Base object that they had sighted on radar and eyeballs had remained unidentified. I'm sure we're all going to sleep better tonight for that story. There's a report on encounters in 2007. I've been recording now. They think this is going on 6 hours. I apologize. Encountered in 2007 at Lakenheath Royal Air Force Base in UK. Pilots described chasing a UAP shaped like a meteor rock. Was not reflective, did not fall out of the sky. It wasn't a meteor. They tracked it on radar on both the planes and on the ground. Chapter 14. AAWSAP visits Skinwalker Ranch and surroundings of the ranch. I am not a believer. I'm an experiencer. I know for a fact that it's real. I've witnessed it with my own eyes, with other credible witnesses by my side, what can only be described as daylight sightings of exotic craft over Skinwalker Ranch. That's the current owner of Skinwalker Ranch. In 2009, 2 Bigelow investigators came to Skinwalker to do comprehensive criminal and counterintelligence investigation. I mean, they check everybody out. And technical sweeps for radio frequency readings to indicate outside surveillance, like is somebody on the outside spying. They got a baseline of the area at night, and then in the next morning, they took several at the ranch over 24 hours. They got no RF signals, no clandestine electronics. They saw that the ranch could be easily penetrated, and it wasn't well guarded. And that it could be penetrated and that would not be detected by the security officers. This led to redoing the security to deter trespassers. In the summer of 2009, a team of 6 investigators, 3 scientists, 2 technicians spent about 2 weeks on missions to interview and collect sensory data. They talked with about 30 people, lifelong residents of the area within a 1 to 2 mile radius of the ranch, to see what they had to say. This included 4 local police officers, 11 Ute tribes people, including a shaman, 12 ranchers, 6 business owners, the director of local fish and wildlife office. Half were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. 11 recounted firsthand encounters with a dog or wolf-like creature that could run at speed on 2 legs, sometimes in conjunction with orb-like activity. Its estimated height was 6 to 7 feet. Many of these reported observations took place during daytime hours. Some sightings were very recent, only a month or 2 ago, while others had taken place a few years ago. They all occurred within a 5-mile radius of the ranch. The Bigelows made a map of the migration routes of bipedal dog-like creatures. They tracked where they were spotted and seen. Many reports of orbs. Reports were then analyzed for confabulation. We call that lying. They used multiple investigations and cross-referenced witnesses. And it's not, like working together to create a story, exaggerating kind of intentionally. Some saw UFOs, triangles, cigar shapes, discs. Some anomalous tracks were photographed. Anomalous, like foot tracks, were photographed. They photographed 2 sets of barefoot human tracks merging into one. Like, where'd the other one go is the implication. A second set of barefoot tracks in the snow that approached a 5-foot-tall barbed wire fence continued in the snow after the fence with no evidence of broken stride, no evidence of climbing the barbed wire fence or jumping over the wire. They also obtained a variety of hair samples. The hair samples were subjected to DNA analysis with inconclusive results. They collected more than 200 reports. they were categorized and included sensed or perceived presence, perception of being watched, observation of paranormal events, perceptions of emotional distress, observation of UAP. There numerous photos of orbs were taken and other light phenomena. They broke the map into a grid, and they did an intensive environmental study like electromagnetism. They studied the soil samples. They looked for ionizing radiation. They used dozens of genetically engineered plants as biosensors to find electromagnetic or radiation deviations from the norm. Like the poor little canary in the coal mine. They did seed germination and growth experiments. They tested communication with games and puzzles that they left out. Let's just leave these games out here and see if anybody does anything with them. Some incidents happened of interference, like new patterns would be set up in non-random manner. That's just bizarre. Chapter 15, the AASWAP findings from the Skinwalker Ranch. So this is where it all comes to a head. Discovery commences with the awareness of anomaly, with the recognition that nature has somehow violated the paradigm-induced expectations that govern normal science. It then continues with a more or less extended exploration of the area of anomaly. And it closes only when the paradigm theory has been adjusted so that the anomalous has become the accepted. This is Thomas Kuhn, who worked with them. I think he's the one with the PhD in, I want to say physics, some science, and then in philosophy, religion. I can't remember. But he balances both ends of the spectrum. The data show that there is a risk for working at Skinwalker. 5 out of the 5 intelligence officers, professionals with combat experience, had visceral anomalous experiences on the ranch, were infected by contagion they brought home. The phenomenon acts like an infectious agent. It harms the health in an autoimmune way. Investigators documented physical sightings like nuts and bolts UFOs and paranormal phenomena. And there are appendices here that I won't even, it lists everything. Outside the ranch, other experiencers report the same issues. There are biological consequences of the ranch and UAP encounters. There's a large untapped reservoir of information inside the human body if it could just be decoded. They pointed to the strategy of treating the immune system as a trillion-cell information processing organ with 10 times the number of cells as the brain that is capable of recording and subsequently reporting insults from UAP experiences. This immune system data would be objective as opposed to the usual vagaries encountered while interviewing eyewitnesses, including altered witness perception, false or implanted memories, and the general fog inherent in the UAP Oz factor. The Oz factor is the term that a British researcher coined to describe the state of consciousness involving altered perceptions of time and space, sometimes but not always experienced during close encounters. A distinct advantage in focusing on the immune system as an information processing organ was that interrogating the immune system is as easy and non-invasive as obtaining a blood sample. And I don't know what they mean when they say this is all encoded and they can tell. Are they saying that you can take repeated blood samples and follow a pattern of change? I wasn't clear about that. Electromagnetic anomalies. The team detected a strong electromagnetic signal not seen before, despite earlier tests, but they could not be explained. It was too sporadic. They did detect something early on, but they couldn't find the report that was written. That's weird. But they did find out that radiation here can damage DNA. It's gamma radiation, can damage DNA and cells. It's very hazardous to people. Plants were studied as potential biosensors. Dormant seeds stored at the ranch had a different germination rate than normal, a higher germination rate. Active seeds arrived active and were studied, germinated slower. So what does that mean? I guess this is consistent with EMS exposure, electromagnetic exposure. It's a very complex topic. Better left to somebody who knows what they're talking about. Read the book. But it is interesting, but it's very complicated. Chapter 16, a disturbance in the force. So for 2 years, they did their investigations, then they got shut down by the DIA because of political hot potato, and the members did try, okay, you shut the program down. Maybe you could find a little home for us in the Department of Homeland Security. Lukatsky met secretly with the Homeland Security people. They were astounded by, they had not heard of any of this. They couldn't believe it. He laid it all out, bizarro and all, and they were shell-shocked is how they're described. That night, Axelrod's son couldn't sleep. He reported, I'm getting hiccups, sorry. He reported the next morning, I didn't get any sleep. They kept me up all night. They kept me up all night. His face was red and puffy and had welts and contusions on his stomach and chest. He'd gone to sleep quickly, but he reported that he'd been awakened by a bright light. The first visitors were a pair of blue orbs. They flew near the bedroom ceiling. He watched with apprehension as they flew near him, sometimes skimming him lightly. His next memory is awakening to 2 small red orbs flying near the ceiling in addition to the blue orbs. They appeared to dive at him. He was terrified. He hid under the covers. This happened several times. He's dozing fitfully. He began feeling pain in different parts of his skin as the orbs brushed past him. When asked why he didn't yell for help, he said he tried, he couldn't yell. Later that morning, they linked the angry red welts on him to the close proximity of the orbs. He complained of 2 or 3 black shadow humanoid figures in his room throughout the night. They were screaming as if they were being tortured and in a lot of pain. Paul, who is partially deaf, said the screaming from the figures took place telepathically in his head. He never saw the faces of the shadowy figures. The combination of the attacks from the orbs and the screaming humanoid shapes in his room left him exhausted, traumatized, and sick. His mother called Kelleher. Paul was nauseous and running a high fever. She took him out of school and took him to urgent care. We'll get back to that. But the same night on the ranch, the dogs were afraid. The guards reported weird atmosphere. One guard on patrol in around the old homestead house felt a weird presence. It flashed his light off and on that he was carrying. And when he said, "Show yourself," brave guy, it flashed and flashed, and he fled the building. He had severe headaches, was exhausted. He had a bad night's sleep, nightmares about a predator, and he felt beaten up in the morning. This was the closest thing to a conversation between a human and the presence on a ranch ever. I mean, it did interact with him. Did Lukatsky's meeting with the DHS create a disturbance in the field, or was this all unrelated? It's hard to tell. I don't remember what happened with the son. The son was sick. Chapter 17, Department of Homeland Security. Kelleher, Putoff, Lakatsky, and Black went to the DHS, met with Jim Bell of the DHS. They were there to talk to Tara O'Toole, Dr. Tara O'Toole, Undersecretary of Science and Technology. She was the director of the Center for Biosecurities at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. In other words, she responded to bioattacks of anthrax, smallpox, and the plague. So this would be a conversation about the technology used in research of the phenomenon across groups and maybe to create a technological umbrella. O'Toole was abrupt to the point of kind of being rude. Kelleher, Putoff, Lakatsky, and Black began. They told of the Bigelow achievements, including the investigation of the Nimitz. They also discussed the health effects of the blue orbs. She was very interested in that. At this point, doing a project with the Department of Homeland Security was actually, it seemed positive. She seemed interested. She met with higher DHS Sacha Mover from rural Kentucky originally. He was raised in an area with no electricity. They were off-grid completely, not by choice, but because the company providing it felt that there wasn't enough profit. In 2007, his family had a gathering outside, and a large UFO was spotted going slowly over their hills. It had multicolored lights, it was silent, and it shot off into space at an unreal velocity. 24 hours later, 3 black SUVs, men in black, came and questioned all the people who were at this family reunion. They told them it will be in your interests not to speak about this incident again. They were very threatening. It was intimidating, and the family was very intimidated. They left at high speed, oddly and without warning. And they never talked. They were petrified. A series of electrical transformers were erected close by, and shortly thereafter, for the first time in their history, the residents were fully electrified. The technology was state-of-the-art, and they began to slowly suspect there might be a link between the threat and the fact that when they kept silent, they had the unexpected appearance of a high-tech electrification unit in their small, remote community. It's ridiculous. Anyway, this guy you didn't have to convince him, Mover. He was a believer, high up in the DHS. He wanted this looked into. Bill Mover began trying to reach out to the keepers of the secrets and other agencies in the government. He was treated rudely, harshly. They said no and hell no. They were convinced that advanced technology was hidden under government supervision at aerospace contractor facilities, and there was no need to study it. The DHS people were therefore afraid to go farther. They were, the implications of the secrecy scared them. They were a new agency and they were afraid. Were they turned away because they were the new kids on the block, or just low on the pecking order? They were a new agency, and this is a 60-plus-year-old secret at the time. But they were convinced that advanced technology was being hidden, and they were upstarts, and they were stirring the pot, the older people. Top leadership decision makers for the DHS decided this was too fringe. We're not going to do it. Chapter 18, after they were disbanded. There were repeated efforts to get them more money, and it failed. But because of this 2-year program, in June 25th, 2021, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force report from the Director of the National Intelligence was finally released. It began with reports from naval aviators of increasing encounters with small UAPs between 2015 and 2016. The New York Times published this in 2017, and they had a shocking front page scoop. Pentagon, the secret UFO investigation, written by Leslie Kean, who was tipped off by Tom DeLonge of Blink 182. And if you haven't seen the videos I made about that, I strongly recommend them. Tom DeLonge, who had money to burn, created To the Stars Academy. He believed in all of this. He believed it was real. And what he found out is really pretty stunning. And then, of course, Lou Elizondo was interviewed. But the story got it wrong. The money did not go to AATIP. There was no AATIP, not really. It went to AAWSAP. One naval aviator, David Favre, was the primary witness. He went public and he discussed the 2004 Tic Tac event and other UAP events. The New York Times covering this gave other news agencies the courage, including international, to suddenly it was okay to discuss UFOs if you were a journalist. Much less ridicule after that. Congress took notice. Senior members of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committees requested briefings. Navy pilots told of their encounters. Congress members asked to sit in on these briefings. This was a huge shift. This is just remarkable. Bigelow created the NIDS. They attracted the best minds. They bought Skinwalker Ranch. They got the attention of Senator Reid. He helped them get funding. They started the AAWSAP, and the hunt for the Skinwalker was read by Lukatsky and by Axelrod, which also helped to get the AAWSAP started with the government. They studied the Tic Tacs. They helped create a program inside the Pentagon that did get called AATIP, but this was much later. And it focused on UAP encounters with military exclusively. Some of these military were interested enough to consult with NIDS and Bigelow, and the core groups of these became the UAP Task Force, formally created by Congress in 2020, but already operating for a few years without a budget, without an office, and with no name. So what they got is legitimacy. Two high-profile advocates, Christopher Mellon, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence under Clinton and Bush, and Lou Elizondo, also working with the government. Bits of the story, videos from the Navy, photos, they all got leaked bit by bit, made public. The 2021 Director of National Intelligence and the UAP Task Force report was not the full disclosure many hoped for. ET didn't land on the White House lawn, but it was a huge step in the right direction because it took a long time to get here. It's about time that they finally said, well, yeah, it's a thing. Chapter 19, The Legacy. The intent of the Reid, Inouye, and Stevens work was not to make all of this public. That wasn't what they started out to do. They were interested in keeping scope of the subject of the investigation as wide as possible. The decision to include the paranormal phenomena and the UAP technology was controversial, and they knew that. They didn't take it lightly, but as witnesses from the past were re-interviewed, so many of these stories were revealed for the first time, these anomalies. They talked about UFOs in the 60s. They didn't talk about the poltergeist activity and the orbs and all the other weird stuff that happened to them. For example, humanoid-shaped black shadows, loud footsteps, hauntings, disincarnate voices, orbs. These people reported precognitive, clairvoyant, telepathic, or unusual electromagnetic phenomena, as well as occasional increases in meaningful coincidences in their lives after these UAPs. Synchronicity. It also happened to naval aviators involved in the Tic Tac, and also people in the Pentagon who investigated for the AATIP. They had the infection thing. It's not uncommon. Ken Arnold, as we mentioned earlier, the Washington pilot who reported the UFOs in 1947, called them flying saucers, he saw orbs and paranormal activity at home afterwards. Jacques Vallée reported psychic effects on 1945 New Mexico people in his book. He gives 12 examples of the psychic effects of UAP eyewitnesses, including telepathic communication. And, he reported this happened 76 years ago. Jeffrey Kripal, the J. Newton Razor Chair in Philosophy and Religious Thought at Rice University in Houston, summarized it. The difficult truth is the UFO phenomenon has both an objective hard aspect. Think fighter jet videos, photographs, alleged metamaterials, apparent advanced propulsion methods, landing marks, and a subjective human aspect. Think close encounters, multiple and coordinated visual sightings, altered states of consciousness, visionary displays often of a most Baroque or sci-fi sort, and experienced traumatic or transcendent abductions. And both sides, both the material and the mental dimensions, are incredibly important to get a sense of the full picture. He wanted to capture both the material and mental dimensions of these UAPs. They also studied the effects on health, and these can be studied as a record of the UAP event. The AAWSAP wanted to create a multidimensional tapestry of physical consequences of the UAP encounters. Just a little bit more. Since 2010, when the AAWSAP shut down, the Invisible College of Jacques Vallée, we did that book. It's a secret network of experts. It has continued this work, including state-of-the-art physiological research. The professionalism of all these groups is noteworthy, and the atmosphere is still fraught. These are not lunatics studying this. The involvement of the government is not very comfortable. It always is about image control and information control. There are now 11 databases in one data warehouse thanks to the AAWSAP. This is a sophisticated repository that includes analyses, data mining. Jacques Vallée is the primary consultant. He's PhD in computer stuff. They created a 6-layer model of potential characteristics of UAP events, from the physical and psychological to the psychic and the natural. So they do not ignore any aspect. And this is the epilogue. There is a convoluted 76-plus year history of UFO phenomenon to contend with, and they broke it into phases when they studied it. The first is June of 47, Ken Arnold, Mount Rainier, Washington, and the numerous fleet sightings shortly thereafter, Mexico, Washington, D.C. Second phase, 1949 on, ordinary people began to claim interaction with ETs, getting onto their craft. They always got a message. Anti-nuke, environmental destruction is happening, do something. This began the contactee movement, and often messages of brotherly love from the ETs. Part 3 began to die down. That began to die down as Part 3 began, as incursions over military facilities began, over the nuclear facilities and military facilities in both the United States and in Russia. The fourth part, between the 60s and the 80s, is the close encounters of the third kind, abductions with weird procedures. This is when John Mack, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, Whitley Strieber wrote their books, got the imagination of the public, the famous gray alien on Communion. The fifth part is in the 90s to the 2000s, with escalating black triangles, huge, silent, ominous, mysterious. And the sixth is after 2010, the triangles decreased. And now these unidentified objects were interacting with the Air Force and the Navy, with fighter pilots. That was remarkable. So the cumulative unfolding has been profound. It has had profound effects on Western human society since 1947. One question that arises from these 6 phases: is someone trying to tell us something? Does consciousness have something to do with this? Is this about human consciousness? Kastrup, the double PhD, consciousness, he says, consciousness is primary and it gives rise to physical reality. And this is just a little FYI, that's Gnostic. Philip K. Dick believed that. Carl Jung believed that. A lot of great philosophers and thinkers have believed this, and physicists. This whole thing, he says, turns science and policy on their head. The old materialistic view of science is being challenged by a new discipline. He posits that these 6 phases each have a different impact on society. Turns our worldview upside down. It has cultural consequences. It's a nightmare for military industrial complex. They feel helpless. They feel threatened. It has effects on abductees and their families, permanent effects. It's creating an ontological shock. Until we understand reality, being, existence, and consciousness, we can't begin to explain what we're looking at. And that is the end of an exhaustive study of something I knew absolutely nothing about when we started this book. So 8 videos talking about the Skinwalker Ranch, the Pentagon investigation, and how it all unfolded. If you've stuck with me through all of this, I really appreciate it. It is a lot. I understand that. Appreciate you watching. Let me know what you think of this. Let me know if you enjoyed it. I have more up my sleeve. And thanks for watching. Slán go foill. Sláinte.